Kevin Schwaller with KXAN. We've been trying to reach you for an interview.
For months, this Austin attorney has refused to sit down for an interview about some powerful accusations. He says he's helping this man who claims he's visited hundreds of businesses that were not wheelchair accessible. What they're doing could cost hundreds of your favorite local businesses a lot of money, even risk keeping their doors open. But tonight, KXAN investigator Kevin Schwaller tracked down that lawyer who says they're not targeting anyone, only fighting for accessibility.
Yes, attorney Omar Rosales says he doesn't believe there's any reason for businesses not to be following the Americans with Disabilities Act. Now, we started digging almost a year ago. Since then, this attorney and his client have filed a stack of nearly 400 lawsuits. Now, after our investigation, those businesses began organizing to fight the attorney and his client in the courtroom.
We wanted this building to be accessible for everyone.
Ronnie and Chris Clark say they spent more than 100 grand making their building accessible. They put in a second storefront next to this parking space. And to help anyone maneuvering their 3 levels, they installed a lift.
I believe just the lift was, I believe, $38,000 plus the installation, plus the ramp, plus the engineering, plus the electrical.
After all that, they say attorney Omar Rosales and his client John Deutsch, who uses a wheelchair, sued them over parking stripes, a curb, and the door threshold. The lawsuit is still in court.
It's a bit frustrating, to say the least.
Look down the road and you'll find plenty of other businesses or their property owners facing similar lawsuits, including about a dozen banks and lenders, 30 Mexican restaurants, and about 40 automotive shops or dealers, along with hundreds of others in the Austin area, from pawn shops to a publisher of erotic books.
A lot of the businesses thought it was not, the right thing, that they were actually doing everything they could to comply, and that the violations were relatively technical.
Jim Harrington is the Clark's attorney. Usually he's the one filing accessibility lawsuits, not defending against them. He's the former director of the Texas Civil Rights Project. Now Harrington says he's convinced that Rosales and his client are focused on making money. He filed a document with the court claiming Rosales and Deutsch are abusing the Americans with Disabilities Act for their own benefit. Harrington also recently questioned Deutsch in a court deposition about the Clark case.
The fact of the matter is, you didn't read this before you filed it, did you? You're agreeing with me or not agreeing with me?
I'm agreeing.
Okay. So you're suing somebody in federal court for money, and you don't even read or look at what you're signing, do you?
Objection, relevance. Objection asked and answered.
Deutsch said in another deposition that aside from visiting businesses in his everyday life, that his attorney also gives him a list of businesses to check out.
There are ways, a couple strategic ways to defeat these cases. But the problem is they still require the investment of attorney time.
Which is why he says businesses might decide to settle the lawsuits rather than fight back. Lawyer Michelle Nealand argued against Rosales and his client in court and says defending against the suits poses challenges.
Some of the cases that Mr. Deutsch brings are bringing up valid complaints. So there's a balance that has to be struck there.
And businesses are making changes. A copy of a confidential settlement agreement obtained by KXAN also indicates once the defendants pay up, Rosales and his client let the people they're suing be their own judge of whether they've fixed any accessibility problems. Still, Nealand takes issue with what she calls the tone of the lawsuits. Court records show Rosales sent emails to one business owner who was trying to dismiss a case, saying, "You're just making it worse for yourself. The longer we go on this case, the more money you will owe at the end." Businesses we've been talking to believe you're in this for the profit. What do you say for that?
ADA's been law almost 30 years, and, we're here fighting these cases, and without the work, nobody cares, and no work will get done to make buildings compliant.
We uncovered a letter a lawyer for someone being sued says Rosales sent. It demanded $7,000 and suggested the defendant could face up to 100 grand in attorney's fees and penalties if he didn't settle. How much money have you made in settlement so far?
We can't disclose settlement terms. Those are all confidential, so I can't talk about.
What about just broadly?
I can't discuss numbers. It's all subject to confidential settlement agreement.
Okay, so there is a contract between you and your lawyer, right? And that contract outlines what percentage of the recovery will be yours. Is that correct?
Objection.
If Rosales and his client settled every lawsuit for the amount in that letter, that would bring in nearly $2.7 million. When we continued asking questions, Rosales tried to change the subject to focus on KXAN.
I would really encourage you to check your parking because you may not be compliant and you may be subject to, an additional lawsuit as well.
Is that a threat?
No, I'm just saying, have you checked your compliance? And you're asking me about compliance with the ADA, and I'm telling you that people don't care and people don't check. So have you checked your parking lot? How about the parking lot at the KXAN? Why don't we go check right now? Is it ADA compliant?
Sir, I'm not in charge of our building.
Okay, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, excuse me.
So, the number of lawsuits, can you please just answer that? You have got no comment about the number of lawsuits, sir?
By the way, in case you're wondering, we did get our parking lot checked for compliance.
Kevin, I am curious if Rosales is warning these businesses before he files the lawsuits.
No, and that's one of the biggest complaints we're hearing from the businesses. Now, it's important to note that the law does not require any sort of notice.
So what can a business do then if they get one of these lawsuits?
Not much other than settle or try to fight it in court. Now, the state bar does investigate complaints against attorneys. We have not seen any complaints against Omar Rosales. However, the bar does not make those public unless there's a disciplinary action or unless it ends up in court.
Okay, so what happens next?
Well, one of the things we're watching is these two attorneys are kind of battling it out behind the scenes, and that's Omar Rosales on the one hand and the defense attorney, Jim Harrington, on the other. They're asking the court for discipline against each other. Now, a judge should hear later this month their claims and decide whether to take any disciplinary action. It's too soon, though, to say what kind of impact this could have on all of these lawsuits.
All right, Kevin, thank you very much. Online now, our digital investigation, demanding action, Austin's ADA lawsuit industry. Kevin and fellow KXAN investigator David Barrere take you on an interactive tour of these cases sweeping the city. See when and where they're playing out. Plus, video extras with some of the main players behind the suits, and an in-depth look at what's really at the heart of this issue, accessibility and the law. It's all in the investigative section of KXAN.com. Today, a federal court sanctioned Austin attorney Omar Rosales around $176,000 in penalties after he filed nearly 400 lawsuits against local small businesses claiming minor ADA violations, costing owners thousands and threatening their livelihoods. KXAN investigator Kevin Schwaller has been following this story and explains the new court order.
Our year-long KXAN investigation exposed the actions of Rosales and his client as the legal pressure against him began to mount. The judge has also referred him to the local federal bar for disciplinary action, suggesting that he might be disbarred from practice in federal court. In his order, the judge states the issue is the abusive, disrespectful, and fraudulent manner of which Rosales has conducted this litigation. Rosales has behaved in embarrassing and shocking ways throughout this litigation. Rosales also sued KXAN during this process, a suit which was eventually dropped. Kevin Schwaller, KXAN, investigates.
And to check out our full investigation, Demanding Action, Austin's ADA lawsuit industry, you can find it in the investigative section of KXAN.com. A new twist in a KXAN investigation about an attorney who has filed hundreds of lawsuits against Austin businesses.
We told you about attorney Omar Rosales. He filed the lawsuits with one client, accusing businesses of technical violations of the Americans with Disabilities Act.
But KXAN investigator Kevin Schwaller found the lawyer is now targeting websites.
Following our investigation, a federal judge ordered Rosales to pay more than $175,000 in penalties for his actions and conduct during several of those cases. The judge also mentioned the potential profit-making motive of that lawyer. Now he appears to be going it alone, representing himself in new lawsuits suing websites in the name of the Americans with Disabilities Act.
The problem with what Rosales is doing is he creates animosity between the disability community and the larger community. And the goal of the ADA, of course, is to have one whole communities.
That's attorney Jim Harrington. He's a longtime civil rights advocate and lawyer and ended up defending businesses in the last round of lawsuits from Rosales and his client. He believes Rosales is abusing the Americans with Disabilities Act. Some disability advocates in the community agreed, but recently Harrington has continuously been getting phone calls.
I think like 15 within 2 days from different parts of the state, and they're all the same thing. They're all healthcare facilities, and they had all gotten the same form letter.
Harrington says this is a letter from Omar Rosales. It states the recipient's website failed a test and is in violation of federal disability access law. It claims problems with things like not having text for links that can be read by a screen reader for people who can't read the text off the screen themselves, or not having website accessibility policy posted in a place where it can be easily found. The letter Harrington showed us comes with an unfiled lawsuit and demands $2,000 to settle. It states if the person doesn't enter settlement negotiations, Rosales will file the lawsuit and contact the federal government. The letter argues issues with the website also mean the business should not be getting Medicare or Medicaid funding, and states that Rosales will explore suing to obtain reimbursement of federal tax dollars.
The first person that I represent is a very small pediatrics home care facility, and he totally freaked them out.
We spoke with attorney Omar Rosales earlier this year for a story about the lawsuits he and his client were filing against physical businesses.
You know, ADA's been law almost 30 years, and you know, we're here fighting these cases, and without the work, you know, nobody cares, and no work will get done to make buildings compliant.
Harrington says Rosales is basing his recent letters on web guidelines, not law. A court document filed by an attorney for another business makes the same claim. Kevin Schwaller, KXAN, investigates.
And we reached out to Rosales today, but did not hear back. As part of the recent sanctions against him, a federal judge referred Rosales to a disciplinary committee and asked it to consider disbarring him. The process of reviewing the case could take months, though. Harrington says he is now starting the Texas ADA Defense Project to defend against lawsuits and threats he believes are exploitive. After our initial stories, Rosales also filed a lawsuit against KXAN for our reporting. He later dropped that lawsuit. We have been following lawsuits filed by Rosales for some time now. To read our demanding action investigation, go to KXAN.com.